Some art today. Hey, hey, hey. Let's make art today. Okay. Everybody ready? Everybody ready? Okay, welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be making another painting by one of my favorite artists, K.M. Graham, or Kate Graham, or Kathleen Graham, however you want to say it. A lot of the times I've seen it just K.M. Graham. And what I think is really exciting about this artist is that she didn't really start making art until her early 50s. And that is, I think, really inspiring to any of us who are getting a little bit older to think about, hey, you know, maybe I could try doing something new or a little bit different. And, you know, we think of like old dogs can't pick up new tricks. Well, she is an example of somebody who glass ceiling or whatever to which she exploded, or the rule didn't apply, or whatever. I'm mixing up all my metaphors. Anyway, so she is somebody I think is really inspiring because, you know, even at myself, I'm in my early 40s, not too far away from where she was when she first began making her art. And, you know, you start to think like, you know, I guess it's too late for me to do this and that. Well, she raised a couple of kids. She had a husband, and when the kids moved out and her husband passed away, she decided, you know, now's my time to devote some time to myself and to this thing that I'm super passionate about, because her and her husband traveled around the world looking at art together, but she was just too busy for being a full-time mother to pursue this as her hobby and then eventually as her career. So let's dive right into painting today. And when that reloads here, okay, there we go. Okay, so first things first, we're just taking a look here at the Facebook group that I encourage everybody to join. If you're watching me right now, it'd be great for you to join this so that you can upload your pictures to this. What I'm going to suggest going forward is that if you have artwork that you want to share, is to join the group and put it in the group, because I've been telling people, oh, send it to me through Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat, all this different stuff. And then it just takes me so long to go through all those different social media feeds to find your artwork. I mean, you could post it wherever you want, but if you want me to share it with the rest of the group in our feedback sessions, this would be the avenue to do it. It'll just save me some time. So there's a whole bunch more requests there I haven't had a chance to get to. And then there's also this Dropbox folder. The link is right down below, and you'll see if we click on Kate Graham, if we do that eventually. There we go. Internet is a little bit slow today, but you'll find the printout that, here we are. There's the outline version as a PDF and as JPEG. And then the original, which I accidentally tried to print off, and you could see my printer was like, no, too much. I basically probably used all my black ink in one go there. So I got the beach ball of death here spinning around. That's great. But when you do print it out, this is the outline, and then here's the original painting by K.M. Graham. And the first thing that might come to mind is you're like, oh, this is going to be a real easy painting. We're just going to bang this one out and we're going to be done here in 30 minutes. And the more I look at it, the more complex this artwork actually is. Now, I'm going to walk you through step by step on how I would do it, but I think it's deceptively tricky if you really wanted to do it exactly the way she did. So, but anyway, here's the tracing. Now, this is, in terms of composition, a fairly straightforward painting. You could hand draw this without using the transfer process, but if you wanted, here is the outline. So, let's see if, oh, looks like we've still got a beach ball here. Okay, well, while my computer is loading up, let's start getting ready for today. So, you know what, I was going to show, maybe while I get that out, here's, after the previous class, I also did a whole bunch of other experiments and tried using some other materials, including, I finally went and got some Floetrol, which I had, but I don't know, I guess it must be on campus, I just left it in the office there. But if you're really interested in getting the cells, that would be the material to use to help you get a little bit more of the cells in the paint pouring method that we explored in our previous class. And again, I'll upload a version of the paint pouring where I redid a whole bunch using Floetrol, and you can see the difference. It does make a difference for sure. Okay, so we'll get all our materials out. We'll need a couple of rags. And, oh, the reason why I was I wanted to show you these, not because of the Floetrol, because I didn't use Floetrol in either of these, but I was just looking at the difference, because a lot of these canvases started to kind of warp a little bit as over the past 24 hours. And you can see this one here. This is one of the ones I ordered off of Amazon, and there is a link to it below, but this one did warp a little bit. I imagine if I was using the cheap dollar store ones, it would warp even more. But I noticed this brand here, which, has all the appearances of being the most professional one, has stayed totally rigid and solid and hasn't bent or curved at all. So, my recommendation, if you want to get more of these and you're thinking of doing a lot of pouring of paint, then this might be the best brand, and the link is below in the video description. Having said that, this one has worked very well for every other purpose. It's not until I started putting a lot of paint on here, and this actually took all the way up until this morning. Both of them were still a little bit wet, so there was a lot of paint on those canvases. So I'm going to use two canvases today. These are this one and then this one here. Again, this is also in the video description below. I found this one's been pretty good so far as well. So let's give them a gentle sanding here. And, the reason why, or probably can't hear me while I'm sanding, but give it a couple little runs through. The reason why I'm going to do two different ones is I'm going to try using a different underpainting or wash to begin with. So I'm going to use one that's going to have like a cool blue, and then one I'm going to put well, I was going to put, let's say if we look at the original here, I was going to do one that's got a cool blue wash to start. And then I was also thinking of doing an identical version, but putting down a warm yellow for kind of like twinkling stars. But even as I'm thinking about it, maybe I could have a little bit of fun and try to put some like Northern Lights colors in, like bright greens. So just thinking out loud to myself as I go along here. So let's get some paint on our palette. My warm yellow, warm blue, cool red, warm red, cool yellow, cool blue, just like that. Got my palette all warmed up. And let's put some paint on the palette. So today is our final session of our intro to acrylic painting course. Can you believe it's actually I've technically 45 paint classes, but I also refilmed a few of them, and then there's the feedback. Oops, that's in the wrong place. Okay. As I'm trying to chew gum and walk at the same time here. So there's been over 50 episodes that I've done for this class. Look at that, I can just swap those labels. So there we go. So a lot of content out there, and this is what an adventure it's been for me as well. This has been a really exciting opportunity to paint along with you guys, and I wouldn't say I'm sad, because I'm just going to continue doing something, moving on to a slightly different idea starting next week, which we'll talk about as we paint here. But I won't really want to get something onto the canvas as quickly as possible, because we might have a little bit of a few things drying here. So we'll do one at a time here. The first one, I'm going to get one of my brushes out, and I'm going to mix a cool blue with a little bit of white, and I'm going to put that over the entire surface here. So let's see. I'm going to scoop a bunch of white out, and then let's get some blue here. So what I'm doing, I want to get a really light color on the background, and let's even add a little bit of water on there. You know, I could use, for this wash, I could use pouring medium, I could use glaze medium, I could use slow dry medium to extend the paint and to help spread it over. But in this case, the water is going to do just fine, and it's going to dry faster than all three of those. All three of them will have a very similar effect, but they're just going to take longer to dry. It's not until I'm putting on paint on top of paint that maybe water is not the best solution. Okay. Get my edges. One of the reasons why, I go back and forth and I'm doing these cross-hatching is also just to help make sure that I've given the paint every opportunity to get into any potential cracks or, like the texture of the canvas. Even though I've put a layer of gesso on here before and then sanded it, there's still texture. I can still see that texture. It's not quite as pronounced as it was right out of the package. But this just also helps, because if I just kind of go all the way across, I might have paint, on one, let's say this is a little mound, right? And I just brush paint onto this side. This side might have no paint and still be a little bit white on there. So that's why I'm always doing a little bit of extra on there. Okay. That's a nice blue. So let's move you off to the side, and let's approach this one. So I was thinking about just doing, maybe a warm yellow to give it something a little different showing through there. But I wonder what could be fun. Is what if I did yellow and then some kind of greens and yellow as well in there? Or maybe cool yellow? Okay, so let me see. How about, I'm going to take this same white, make it a little bit more. I want the white in there just to be as kind of luminous as possible. So, should we use warm yellow? You know what? Maybe I'm going to use the cool yellow. So if we put this, even though there's that blue, I don't mind it going a little bit green. Because I'm going to go over top of those little stars later on. So. Let's see, let's paint this. I'm going to paint this. It's almost like this looks like a fluorescent green, like if you have, or not fluorescent green, a glow-in-the-dark green. It's the kind of, I have some coasters that we have upstairs that are like these silicone glow-in-the-dark coasters, which are really fun at night. When we turn the lights off, they glow. And our daughter loves to chew on them. And they're probably made of some poisonous material. But they look really cool. And she enjoys it, so. Okay. As I said, I could, if you wanted to draw out the image first, that might be helpful, and you kind of really have a pretty clear idea of where your the Northern Lights thing is going to go across the screen there. But let's see. What if as I do this, I'm just going to... Okay, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to get a little bit of this paint off of my brush. Just get a little water. Let's get a little more yellow on here. And this time, I think I actually will put a little bit of the slow dry medium wherever I left it. There we are. So I'm going to use my slow dry medium. And I'm going to squeeze a bit out here. You don't have to do this. This is just, I'm just having a little bit of fun. It's our last class, so I'm going to put a bit of this in there. And then let's see, let's get the painting up on the screen. So let's just imagine it's going to be somewhere. Like this. And then maybe let's make it a bit more greenish. And then I'm going to take a soft brush here, and I'm just going to try to blend this out a little bit. So this is just a dry brush. And you don't have to do this. I just want to try to take any of the sharp, where the paint has any texture. I just want to try to blend that down a little bit. They're still pretty, the background's kind of wet too, so. I can do the same sort of effect afterwards, but I'm just thinking, let's just play around a little bit and see what happens if we do this earlier on in this canvas. Right, so already the background down here is all dry, almost dry, but this area now that I'm working in is still wet because I put the slow dry medium on there. Keep blending that out. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna take some blue right out. I was gonna put that right in there. Might be too much. Okay. So there's a little too much paint on this dry brush here. So there we go. You'll barely be able to see what I'm doing afterwards as this painting progresses, but come on. These little hairs and get in there. Oh, there's another one. Okay. So I'll put these to the side. Going to use the blow dryer just to help speed these guys along. Hi, Eagle. Thanks for chiming in. Okay. So, I have no idea what you're talking about, Eagle, but I'm glad you're joining us. And I think it would be a great idea if you did your own live stream where you taught people how to paint and also talk about your autism. I think that's cool. That'd be really cool. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to kind of start putting in the white onto this canvas, right? Which is maybe a little bit different than you may have expected, let's say, because the thing is if I now take my brush and I try to paint around all these little dots, it's gonna drive me absolutely bonkers mad. And you could see the way she painted it, there's kind of an evenness. So it looks like what she's done is that there's a few last layers that are going right across the whole painting. And how would you do that and try to get this nice even surface without all of this finicking around every single one of the stars? Well, when I look at it, what I imagine she's done is what we're going to do right now. Now, I'm not exactly sure, and she's no longer with us, so we can't ask her how she did it. But my hunch is that what she's done is applied the stars and this stroke of the northern lights over top, and then done a bunch of washes of light blue over top of it, and then possibly taken a rag and dipped some of that paint back off. So we'll see. We'll see how this works. And it's always a little bit of a detective mystery trying to figure out how an artist did what they did, because a lot of artists are very secretive about their processes. So let's go back down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this white and let's take a little bit of blue, and maybe that's a little bit way too much. It actually should be lighter than this. So I'm just going to get a bunch of that off. I just want the tiniest little hint of blue in there. Okay, and it might be easier if we start down here. We just lay out where we think the bottom of this painting is going to be. I'm going to quickly go across the picture. Right, at this point, not a lot of change happening. It's kind of hard to distinguish the top and bottom. Let's see, I'm trying to get it kind of aligned half and half. There we go. And as I want to go here, now I've got this down. I'm just going to start kind of, she's got these like little cloud shapes. This gives me an opportunity to kind of practice a little bit. These little bit of kind of little hills down there. But we're going to come back to this later on. Okay. Next, I'm going to take my brush and let's do this swirl across here of the northern lights going right across. You can see mine isn't exactly like hers, and that's okay. Okay. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a whole bunch of little spots for stars. And if you want to put them exactly where they are in the original, then of course you can use the template, right? So let's get a different view here even. So I get the paint on my brush. To get these kind of spots, I just get the paint on my brush, and I'm using one of these round brushes, kind of a pointy brush, right? And then I'm just going to take it, and then I put it down, and I don't know if it comes across very well, but I just put it down, and then I do a little spin. You know, as I'm doing this, I think to myself, oh, I can think of a few other ways that we could go about making this painting. Yeah, we only have a limited amount of time, so I'm just going to do the ones that I think come kind of most immediate to mind. You know, I always think it's what's interesting is it's sort of like you go to, like, it's like a, you know, what is it? The Top Chef? You know, they have those competitions where someone they have like a special chef who everybody you know, famous chef, and they make a meal, and then the contestants have to recreate that meal only from taste. A lot of what we've been doing is kind of similar, right? All we have is the final result, and then we have to kind of work our way back, and using our understanding of painting and different techniques, try to solve the puzzle. Okay. Okay, have a good day, Eagle. I haven't read the whole conversation there, but it sounds like it was an interesting one. So glad to have you join us for. And feel free to come back anytime. Okay. So. Or let's see, we want this view here. So what we've got right now is we've got this blue underpainting, and then we've put the little bit of white. It's got a tiny bit of blue in it, but not much. I'm going to let this dry, and while that's drying, we'll work on the other one, and I'll use a fairly similar process, I guess. Although, I wonder, you know what, let's do this one a slightly different process. So, since we've got two, I was going to do the same one, but we have the luxury of doing it two different ways here. So, let's just make sure this is all dry. one little blast of the heat here. Might see the internet might slow down here in a second. So we're gonna cover it with the blue, and then using a rag, I'm gonna start wiping things away, including the stars. So that's gonna be how I'm gonna do this one. The other one I'm gonna do fairly similar, but this will just be kind of interesting to see how well this works. So, looking at my palette and trying to find a place that's not covered in paint. Because again, this painting looks really simple until you realize to get that nice flat texture she's got across there, where that blue, we have those the colors shining through. It's like, oh, now that I look at it, oh, there's a lot more going on in this painting than I originally thought, which I think is the genius about good art. Is good art kind of makes you think like, oh yeah, this would be fun. I can do this. It'll be really easy. And then you start doing it, you're like, whoa, okay, hold on a second. There's somebody who's got the trick up their sleeve. So which brush? I want to use a bigger one. I guess I gotta clean one of these off here. Yeah, you know what? On YouTube, all sorts of anybody can join us, which is one of the great things about being totally out there. I've been on YouTube for pretty much since the first few months it existed, and I've seen every single thing you can imagine. I've been called every single thing you can imagine. So I've got a pretty tough exterior, and I've also worked with a lot of children. I've worked who can be very vocal about their feelings and their thoughts, and I've also worked with a lot of people who have various different mental and physical challenges, and I think sometimes people generally I tend to kind of err on the side of people mean well, but just have different ways of expressing themselves. And so I try to see if I can understand the logic and the thoughts behind someone's expression before I get too worked up about things. So, and kill them with kindness, as the old saying goes here. Okay, so I'll just show you what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to clean up my palette a little bit because I'm going to use most of this square or box for the blue. So just want that. It's not that I don't want white in my mixture. I just want to make sure that I don't get too much accidentally in there that I don't want. Okay. So I'm going to now take the slow dry medium, and I'm going to put a bunch on there. Right? You can see, let's get, right, almost like 1-to-1 here. Right? So there's, what's the best way to show that? Right. Big blob of it there. Right, almost 1-to-1, slow dry medium to the blue. And let's mix this up. Now technically, when we do this, the paint shouldn't change. The color shouldn't change. It shouldn't get any darker or more white or anything else. It should stay pretty much the same color. The difference is that we might make it a little bit more transparent, which, you know, depending on the color underneath it, may change the color slightly. All right, so as we paint over this yellow surface, we may notice a bit of a change. And you know what? I'm going to put even more in there. So now we're at about almost... Oh my goodness, that's funny. I don't even know where... Okay, well the good thing with this is let's just clean the brush off a bit. And the slow dry medium, I have no idea where that red came from. Okay, let's just put some more on here. Okay. Yeah, it looks like there's some internet issues there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now just take a rag and just wrapping it around my finger. I'm now just going to take this and go across. And I think, you know, this, especially this first layer, I'm going to make it kind of wide. So that I can fade in, because we're going to do this a few times. Okay. And then now, I'm just going to, again, wrap my finger, right? And then let's just put some little spots here. Every once in a while, I'm just going to change where my finger is. And then let's also wipe away down here where the And so I've got a bunch here. Now if I want to make some that maybe are a little bit bigger, right, I can just take it and rather than just tapping, kind of twisting my finger a little bit. So let's see down here. And the good thing is if I go overboard, when I do the next coat of paint over top of it, I can just leave certain of these little stars without going over them, and then it'll kind of seem like they're much further away. So I know people are saying there might be a problem with the internet. I think it's just YouTube. I am getting some warnings on my end saying that there's a problem. So you're not losing your minds, my friends. We're okay. Oh, I kind of like how they almost match up there, right? What? Almost. Anyway, that's just, I'm losing my mind. I just was like, oh, that's kind of neat. Okay. Alright, so there's one. We're going to let this dry, and then we're going to do this several times over top of this painting. Okay. So let's do that to this one. So we can still use this same mixture here. I think I'm going to make a little bit more of it. Alright, so I just put a little bit more on there. And put a lot of slow dry medium in as well. Well, actually I was going to put more in, but I am running low on that. Which is fine, I can always use different other mediums I have here. Again, the glaze would work. Even the pouring medium would work fairly well as well. So just making sure I got that nicely stirred in. If I didn't have any medium, I could do this. I would just have to maybe put a lot of paint on and then wipe it off as quickly as possible. So I don't have the luxury of kind of taking my time. So let's brush this over here. So I didn't put as much slow dry medium in here, so this is much thicker than I was expecting it to be. And now I have a much harder time seeing my original stars underneath. But that's okay. Take some of this excess paint off, and let's just go back over. Just trying to get rid of some of the lines that are kind of forming there. Okay, so we'll just do the same thing again. Yeah, I've lost the plot. I can't see my so we'll just draw it again. Ooh, that's quite fun. I like that. That's fun to do. Okay. Maybe I'm going to start in here because I got a lot of paint on my finger. So, you know, if I go a little bit wide, that's okay. Because I want to kind of have a few layers where this is going to get progressively darker, and then we'll see this kind of shining through here. So especially on these first few layers, getting the technique down, we have a lot more room to play. Let's do the clouds at the bottom. Oh, sorry, I'm using a warm blue for this. So I used the cool blue first, and this is a warm blue that I put over top of it. You could use a cool blue for sure, no problem. I like there. It looks to me like she's got a ultramarine blue, a little bit of a purplish blue. Okay. I'll do some smaller ones. Yeah, I wonder, if I take this rag and I put it on an object that's a little bit pointier, in fact, not even that brush. Let's try something even smaller, just taking a small paintbrush. Kind of twisting that up, and then, if we take this, might be a little bit small, a little bit too small. This actually will work later on in the process when we have, when we're on maybe our third pass with the. So actually, some of these small ones, some of these are going to end up being much smaller as we progress here. Okay, so I'm going to blast both of these with some air, and then we'll be able to do this whole process all over again. So it's still a little bit tacky because there is a lot of slow dry medium I put in there, right? In order to help make this process go a little bit easier. So the more of that medium you put in there, well then obviously the slower it's going to dry. Even with the hairdryer. So this is certainly taking a long time to dry. I think it's also, I'm using the hair dryer, which is hot, and it can also be a little deceptive because it is sort of heating the paint up as well. So sometimes you have to blow dry it and then let it sit for a couple seconds to see if, once it cools down, if it's actually still wet or not. And just like little things, as I did this, I don't know what happened, but there's little tiny dust particles. I must have had a dust storm in my studio momentarily. But if that happens, you get little tiny specks that form on... My recommendation is to resist the urge to get your finger in there and start smushing things away until it's dry. Because the likelihood of a better outcome is better when it's dry than when it's wet and then you start moving paint around. There you go. So a few little tiny specks. They just come right off. This is still tacky to the touch, and I really do want this to be as dry as possible before I put another layer on there. So let's just see how this one's turned out so far. You know, you can see the colors are very different, right? Let's take a look at the original. So as I suspected, this one is much closer in terms of color to K.M. Graham's original painting, but here's me just sort of doing something slightly different with a bit more of those that green that is typical of the Northern Lights, which is a question I would ask everybody is, has anyone ever seen the Northern Lights in person? You know, as Canadians, we have an opportunity to see Northern Lights, maybe more of an opportunity than most other people on the earth, except maybe people in Scandinavia and Russia. That's what I think, because I always think of the Northern Lights as being northern, right? But I'm sure there's southern lights. You know, maybe if you're in the Andes and somewhere without a lot of artificial light, you should be able to probably see some similar type of effect. So I've had an opportunity to see the Northern Lights a few times. Once when I was up in Dawson City in the Yukon. If anyone has been to Dawson City, or if you haven't, I think Dawson City is a requirement for every Canadian. Dawson City to me is, I did an art residency there. I spent 2 months in Dawson City at this place called Kayak, the Klondike Institute for Contemporary Art and Culture, I think. And it is Dawson City is I think everybody on Earth, I think, thinks that Dawson City is what Toronto and Vancouver and every other. I think that's what they think. Everybody in Canada lives in places like Dawson City, and even I think us Canadians, we have this, or at least I do. I can't speak for everybody, but I think that we have this idea, this myth in our mind of kind of like that's the way real quote-unquote Canada actually is. It's a fun place, and the people up in Dawson City are super unique. If you ever get a chance, you should jump at the opportunity to go to the Yukon. Whitehorse is also Whitehorse is also a really fun little town. The people up north are fantastic, and I think that's just because you're living in a landscape that is pretty harsh, and if you're not friendly to the people around you, then when you really need them, you're gonna wish you were more friendly to your neighbors, because it's not a hospitable climate. These are still quite wet. You know, I think if I was to do this again, and I could do the next layer, I could do as a glaze rather than the slow dry medium, just because how slow this is taking to dry. But obviously, if you're painting by yourself in your house and you only have a certain amount of time, you could just let it dry and then come back tomorrow and do this again and let it dry, come back tomorrow, which is probably how she painted. I mean, I'm not exactly sure she used this method. She was, I think, painting with oil paints, which would be slightly different kind of process, obviously using different materials and additives in there. But if you're painting with oils, then you are waiting for time for things to dry over time. I think this is almost dry here, so I'm just going to blast it again. So one of the things with that slow dry medium is it goes on very shiny. So here's this one. I don't know if you can see. So this still feels, it's tacky. Definitely still tacky. Whereas this one is mostly dry. I think it's dry. A little bit tacky. And the shine goes off. So I wonder if you can see these side by side, the gloss. Can't quite see it. I can see it myself. This one is way more glossy, but as it dries, it'll go matte again. It won't be dry, which this one is almost there. Now, the reason why I really want it to be as dry as possible is that if I do this again and it's still a little bit wet, what ends up happening is I'm going to be scrubbing this paint, this first or the most recent layer off, and potentially some of the paint underneath that as well. And that would be a real frustrating thing, because then I'm going to start getting uneven patches in this blue, and that's when, you know, you just go like, okay, I gotta have another sip of tea because this is going to drive me nuts. I could try doing a layer once this is dry, because no matter what, you'd want it to be as dry as possible. I could try doing this without any additive in it whatsoever, just the blue right out of the tube. I'd have to put, if I did that, I'd have to work really, really fast if I want it to be as thin a layer as possible. I'd have to work, because if I put too thick a layer, I'm not going to see any of these marks anymore. And so let me see, could I do it with water? I could try it with water. Now that I've got two paintings that are kind of similar, I always think, oh, maybe what can I do differently? So maybe I could try doing this. Well, the other thing, if I use the water is how I clean my brushes. So it's really going to want to start activating that first surface of paint to try to scrub it off. So I'd have to be, especially that, even just that brushing the paint on there, just the act of brushing the paint on there is going to start scrubbing that surface, right? So if it's not dry, then I risk, you know, if I start going over here, I might start seeing that the same green kind of pulling up on that bottom surface, which would be really frustrating. Or I guess it's yellow in a lot of those areas here. Irene says, my daughter lives in Australia, and one of the first things she looked for when she came home to visit was the Northern Lights. So must have seen some Southern Lights in Australia. Ah. Yes, I've also seen, Deborah says, I saw them in Edmonton, Alberta, on the prairies, and also in the Ottawa area. Wow. And Donna says, my son works in northern Alberta. He says they are amazing sometimes. Donna says, could I use clear gesso? Interesting. The thing with clear gesso is it has a bit of a milky, even though it's supposed to be technically quote-unquote clear, it still has it's not 100% transparent when it dries. It'll go on kind of like semi-transparent, and then it dries, but it's going to have a slightly it'll have a little bit of a slight white quality to it. And also gesso has kind of like a texture to it that is slightly grainy. So you'd be interested to see if you used it. Gesso doesn't have any properties, like it doesn't slow the drying time down at all. So you could use it to extend the paint, to maybe thin the color out a little bit. So you could put a bit of the clear gesso, put a little bit of blue pigment in it, and it would be thinner, but it wouldn't slow. Like in the same way, you could add, you could try using Mod Podge. You could try using your other mediums, right? So, we've got glazing liquid. You got Mod Podge. So similar to the clear gesso, you could use matte medium and gloss medium, Mod Podge. They're all going to help make the paint a little bit more transparent. Same thing with the glazing liquid. The one thing with the glazing liquid is that it not only makes it a little bit more transparent, but it slows the drying time down, right? So this works a lot like the slow dry medium. They're very similar. This is just mostly going to slow down or make it the drying time slow down even more. So I know it gets so confusing. What Donna says, will transparent mixing white work to thin it? Well, I'm not sure. Will transparent mixing white? I'm not sure I understand the question, Donna. If you put white in it, it's most likely going to become more and more opaque. White is going to start obviously brightening it up, or tinting it, I should say, and it might cover up some of the previous layers below. Okay, so I mean I could wait. Actually, this is pretty good. I think that's good. So that one's still really wet. I'm not sure how I got that one so wet, but okay. So here's this is the medium with the slow dry medium in it, and it's still quite wet. It is a little bit more on the tacky end here. I can feel it kind of starting to seize up a bit. And so let's put a little bit more in here. I'm not going to put so much because I don't want it to take forever to dry again. Another, I could make more of this mixture, which would be smart, because what I'm thinking is I'm going to take this and just try to spread it out as thin as possible on here. But again, that might create the possibility that I'm scrubbing the surface. Okay, so everybody ready here? Let's try this again. I'm even going to paint over those clouds again, and we'll see if I can even get some additional kind of texture in the cloud. I mean, ideally, it'd be cool if I could paint the clouds without even adding any white into them, and just using this wiping technique to... Okay. Covered that surface. Now let's do the same thing. Let's wipe away. I'm taking my cloth. And then so I got these little ridges that are forming just because I'm wiping so much paint away. Not too worried about it, but... So now let's go back over. And you don't have to, again, go over all of these little dots. That's why it's kind of nice to put a bunch on to start with. Because some of them are going to be brighter than others, right? And I can also put some where I didn't do any before. Right, so they're going to be much more subtle. And if I want to make any of these more, brighter, I can just kind of go back over and just like extra clean them. Right, see how they kind of get brighter again? Okay, while that's happening, I'm just going to go back down here and scrub some of this off. Maybe not quite as much as I've done previously. In fact, you know what? I should start here. Maybe I kind of want to fix that, but that's okay. Also, I want to make sure that there's not just dots here. I want to make sure I get some right on the edges of the picture. Also to suggest that the painting, that this sky just kind of extends infinitely outward. Alright, so getting some all the way up. Oh, Heidi says this technique could be useful for painting fireworks, dark background. Yeah, that's a great idea. In fact, You're already making me think, like, that would be a cool one to do for, like, Canada Day or New Year's next year. Thank you, Heidi. Great tip. This is why I love having all you guys in the class, because you guys have all the best ideas. You know, I'm so busy trying to keep this ship, you know, from crashing and sinking that I don't have the opportunity to think a little bit like that. That's very smart. Okay, I don't put too many of those little spots all over the place. Looks cool. Okay. So slowly, you know, we'll do this, I think, maybe one more time after this. I'll let this dry. You know, while it occurs to me, you may recall, was it just a couple of, in our what did we use? Oh, when we were doing the Damien Hirst spin painting, I was using this inside of the CDs to spin it, right? I thought it was a fabric marker, but I wasn't even paying too close attention. It's, what this is, let's zoom in here, is, camera's like, okay. So what this is this is a masking fluid. Now, I've used this stuff on like watercolors. I haven't ever used it for acrylic paints, but what I imagine it would work pretty well. What it does is you use this and you draw all over on a watercolor, and then you can paint over top, just like what we're doing now, and then you let it dry, and then you can pick this stuff off, and it will reveal the paint or the surface underneath. Sort of like using tape, right? So this is kind of a fun technique to use. Maybe, I've never used it with acrylic paint. And just like using tape, we'd really want to make sure whatever surface it is that we're applying this to needs to be really, really dry. Otherwise, of course, when we pick off the paint, we're going to be picking wet paint from underneath it. So, but just in case anybody's saying like, oh, we could use the masking paint or masking marker, masking fluid marker, you can. Absolutely, for sure. Okay, so let's move this one. Now this is still, oh, it's still really dry, wet. I'm surprised a whole bunch didn't come off. So let's blast this with some heat. Okay, that seemed to work much better. I could see the shine coming down off of this as I was blow drying it, which is always very satisfying. Okay, I think that one's just about ready. Now, I was thinking maybe at this stage might be a good time to do adding any extra color that I might want in here, and then blow drying it again, of course. So I think I'm going to do just that. I still have some of this yellow green that I mixed before. So I think I'm going to use a little bit of this. This doesn't have any medium in it whatsoever. So let's just, if we look at the original, there's not a lot of additional color in there. But let's just say we put a bit. Now you could have a lot of fun playing around here, adding all sorts of kind of fun colors. Maybe I'll even add a little bit into the clouds. Because, you know, if this is happening above the clouds, which is what it looks like, it almost looks like this is what we would see looking out the window as we're flying past the northern lights. Then we would likely see some of these lights reflecting off of the top of these clouds. So what I'm doing, I just took a dry brush just to kind of go back over and smooth some of this out. Now there's no medium or anything in here whatsoever, it's just the paint as it is. So let's see, maybe I'm gonna also go in here and take a bit of this more yellow, cool yellow. Add just a bit more of that in here. So it's a little bit more intense. It hasn't been tinted with any white, so it's going to be a little more electric. And you know, I'm going to put a few of these in some of the stars. Maybe not all of them, but in a few. I think that's pretty good. And then I'm just going to, again, use my brush just to spread this out a little bit more evenly. And that's also going to help it dry a little faster as I take down any little bumps. You know what? I think I want to take a second to actually look at some northern lights on the computer. Oh, now I finally got the beach ball stopped spinning. So I'm like, oh, let's add some northern lights, and then I'm just making the stuff up out of my mind. Yeah. That real green. I think I need a lot more green in this paint. When I do another layer of blue over top and I've got yellow, it's going to create a bit of a green. So I want to be a little bit careful before I add too much of that, because I'm going to have green in here anyway. So got a little purple in there. I think I want to add a little purple to it too. So okay. Actually, we'll put this down here. So to get some purple, I'm going to take the cool red and this warm blue, mix it together. I need some more of it. So just move. Get some more. purple. It's going to take a little bit of white in here too. That was too much. Too much. Oh well. In fact, so much so that I'm just going to remix that color. Because that white changes things. Okay, I know this isn't in her original painting, but I want to get that bit of that northern looks effect, so, oops, come on. So take a bit of this blue, or purple. You can see it's very dry. In fact, I'm going to put a bit of the slow dry medium in here. Oh, that's a lot. I don't want all of that. I'm just going to take a bit of it. Just this will allow me to brush it around if I want. Let's go back to her painting. Okay, now here's a dry brush. See what the difference is? This is where I had the slow dry medium in here, and here's where I had nothing. It's all done and dry. Nothing I can really do about it. You know, if I get too much in, I can just kind of scrub it a bit. So you decide if you want to put any of this in there or not. It's up to you. It might have been a little much right there. So if there is too much there, then I will add some of that white that I didn't want earlier. And you know what? Let's see if we'll mix a bit more of a greenish yellow. I have a feeling I'm going to be putting some of this on some of the very last layers, but some green in there anyway, but okay. And then just going to blend some of this in a bit. Not too crazy about some of these colors as they look right now. But I'm hoping when I get that next layer of blue over top of it, it'll kind of work itself in there. So let's just blast it with some heat. You know, it's interesting. You know, I was just thinking to myself, this technique that Cam Graham used here. Well, the what I'm again, I'm not sure this is exactly what she did, and there's not a lot of information about her technique out there, but I think that she probably used doing something similar to what we're doing today, and this technique is a rarely used technique, and you could see how you might use this technique. You might stumble on it accidentally. Like you make a mistake and then you're scrubbing some of the paint off and then you go like, whoa, actually, that's kind of cool. I like how I'm revealing things underneath that layer of paint. And it makes me think that she she didn't take, as far as I know, she didn't have a formal education, which generally means she didn't go to art school. She might have taken classes just like we're doing right now, you know, kind of evening classes, or like at a community center, or you know, in a church basement, or private classes with someone. I obviously have no idea, but I do think so. And if she did learn this technique from one of those teachers, that's possible. It's also possible that she stumbled upon this herself, or she did some reading and found out about it and then used it that way. And it makes me think of, that's the benefit of people coming to painting without this formal education, you know, without learning the so-called right way to do it. They're just sort of come in and just break all of the rules because they don't even know what the so-called rules are supposed to be. And again, I'm not sure if that's how she stumbled upon this, but again, that's one of the cool things about art, is that unlike medicine or a lot of other, like law, or I mean, we can go through the whole list, but of different professions, but it does suggest that, you know, people like so-called outsider artists, people coming in without all of that baggage, can really reveal new things to us, because they're just sort of playing around. And anyway, I suspect that maybe that's what she was doing, and one of the reasons she's such a great artist is she really was doing things a little bit more unconventionally. Okay, so we'll see. Is this going to be our last layer of paint on this surface? This is the warm blue over top of everything. This is our third layer of warm blue. So the color's getting deeper and darker. I often find right on the edges it gets much thinner just because the brush is sort of wiping it away. So just kind of making sure I really get those edges. My initial thoughts right now is I'm at this moment not too pleased with those colors that I just put in the sky. Wow, it looks very different on camera than it does here, but it does look dark for sure. We'll see once I start wiping the paint away what the effect actually is. Okay. Maybe it doesn't matter where I start, but so I'm going to try to also go. I wonder if let's try wiping it with a paintbrush and what that result is. Okay, so this is just a dry, clean paintbrush. Right, and I'm going to have to, I don't think it's working nearly as well as a cloth. Actually, you know what? Now it's turning out better. So it's managing, like this last layer of paint is really helping to integrate all those different colors on there. Okay, this is okay. It's a little bit darker in places, but I also don't mind that. So let's start over here. Let's see what hers originally was. I'm getting a little bit very stylized here on the bottom. If you like that, you can use it. If not, go right ahead. And but now it's so this painting looks very different to my eyes in person than it does on the screen, which, you know, my wife and I have talked about many times because she's often sitting upstairs watching the feed with our daughter, and then I'll bring the painting up. She's like, whoa, that looks very different than it did on camera. And this is one of those that looks very different right now. I suspect it'll look a little bit closer once this blue, as it dries, will lighten up a little bit. Ultramarine blue, when it goes on, it usually goes on very dark, and then as it dries, it lightens up a little bit. So I think now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this end of this brush on here. And I'm going to go around and make so much smaller stars. Are they too small? Might be a little too small. So let's just get a slightly bigger brush here. Oh yeah. Because ideally we would have stars of different sizes, and we could do a few the next size up with a different brush. So you put as many of these stars in the sky as you want. You know, if we look at hers, I think she's has many less than I've put in there. She seems to have done it a little bit more strategically, maybe, than mine. I mean, she's the great artist, the master here, and I think some of these stars that I've done are really big. And maybe if I want to do another pass of blue over top of it, instead of going right to this rag, what I would do is use the back of this pen or paintbrush as I'm doing right now. That's cool. I mean, this is a fun technique. I would not have used this normally, but I can really now see lots of applications for it. Okay. So I'm going to set this to dry. I'm feeling pretty good about it. And then we'll work on the other one, which is still a little bit wet. So I'll have to dry this off. And maybe while it's drying, I'll finally get a chance to, we'll talk a little bit about Kate Graham's art, other artworks that I've found. Okay. Okay. This is still quite wet. In fact, I made a fingerprint there just testing it. So we'll let that dry. I'm wondering if I want to add any of that same color to this one that I had here. Again, let's look at comparing this version of the painting. You can see it's starting to get darker and darker and darker and darker as I go. In fact, like I could put another layer on this one even. This one still needs, this has got, what, 2 layers? This has got 3 layers on it. And it could still go darker and darker and darker as we go. I think, though, I probably will only put another layer on this one. And I'm wondering to myself, about, I think I'm gonna add more blue on my palette here. Part of me thinks about trying to do it with just adding water to it. I think the chances, I could be asking for a headache if I just tried to do it without any medium whatsoever. So I'm going to think about it. And again, it's going to need some time to dry. Gail says, I'm using a stylus that came with the carbon paper. It removes the paint really nicely. I'm wondering, Gail, if are you wrapping it in fabric at all, or are you just using the tool itself? It's always interesting to hear how different people are using different techniques and what works and what doesn't. Okay. Well, I'm just going to take a couple seconds here. Let's just look at some of her art while I wait for this to give it a little bit to dry. So, if we look at Kate Graham's Wikipedia, there's not a lot of information about her online in terms, like, there's a bit of biographical info, there's images of her art, but I'm just gonna make sure I got some of these brushes cleaned. Okay, so she went to the U of T and got a degree in home economics, right? Never received a formal education in art. Oh yes, she was a docent at the AGO, the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, which it's the Art Gallery. It used to be the Art Gallery of Toronto. Now it's the AGO, right? Yeah. So docent is someone who is like a volunteer that often gives tours of the museum. Anybody can become a docent at any museum. Well, I can't speak for every museum's policies, but most places aren't going to turn a volunteer away, and so that gave her an opportunity to go around and really look at the art. And also, often docents are given access to curators' tours. They get to meet the curators and ask curators questions. When I've exhibited at a museum, there's usually a training for the staff with the artist. So kind of towards the end of the installation of an exhibition, they'll gather all of the docents, all of the staff, the education people, education staff, and we all go through the exhibition together, and then I'll explain, my thoughts for various different kinds of artworks and tell stories and that kind of thing, which they can then go and tell visitors and kids, students who come through as part of various education programs and tours. And so that would have given her a real good opportunity to kind of go behind the scenes at the Art Gallery of Toronto, again, now known as the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. And I am sure that she would have met a number of the leading artists at the time. And when we think about this, it's what, 1960, I think, is when she first started making art on her own after her husband died in 62. So, in the Art Gallery of Toronto in the 60s would have been showing some of the leading artists at the time. Like you're thinking about the Group of Seven happened 40 years before that, but all of their work would have been in the collection. And some of those artists, including Lauren Harris, were still around. A.Y. Jackson was still around, and they would have been popping in and out, and so she probably met a number of those artists and saw them doing tours and was probably quite inspired by them. You can see in 1967 she has when she goes to, or 61, goes to Cape Dorset in the Canadian Arctic. And Cape Dorset has famously this artist-in-residence program that, let me see, where, I thought I found, so here's a print. So in Cape Dorset is very famous for the printmaking. and a lot of Inuit artists learn printmaking, and there's probably a few of you watching right now that have prints that were made by artists living in Cape Dorset. And they often have well-known artists that fly up there and collaborate with the people that live there in Cape Dorset, which is a very small community. And there's a really good National Film Board documentary about this whole program. Anyway, it's a whole other thing. So this is one of the prints that she would have made up there. Let me see, is there anything else I want to mention? So here's just some of her artwork. You can see it shares like some similarities to Helen Frankenthaler that we looked at last class. You know, some of these using that same stain pouring method. You know, where the paint goes in and it kind of slowly spreads out like watercolor. And you know, a lot of these really beautiful paintings. You know, I look at this, I just see somebody who's having a lot of fun. I imagine that making her artwork was... This is beautiful. That's gorgeous. Let me see. Will this open? Of course we can't look at it unless we give somebody a membership, right? Let me see. What? Let me see. Okay, so it's not going to let me even zoom in on that. Let me see. So here's just, like, look at how beautiful these landscapes are. So she's using, like, the paint that she's applying is quite thin, and it's either very wet or using the same dry brush technique that we used when we did, like, Renoir, for instance. Right, here's this oh, that's a really nice one. That would have been cool to do as well. Well, there's more and more episodes to come, right? So maybe we'll revisit Kate Graham in the future. Okay, so let's come back here. Let's see if this is still wet. Okay, my next layer, I think I'm going to just use... Let's just see if we can just use water. Okay. It's funny how, like, that drying process works. Something like, I think it's sometimes it's you blow dry it and you just let it sit for like 10 minutes and then you blow dry it again And all of a sudden, it dries much quicker. It's almost like it just needed a bit of a break. So I still see some streaks here. Okay, I think it's still a little bit wet. But okay, so what I'm going to try doing here is let's just try doing this with a little bit of water instead. Now, I don't have too good a feeling about this, but I think it might be instructive just so we can see the difference between different materials. Now, doing this, I feel like I'm going to have to go pretty quickly. Now, there's probably a little bit of slow dry medium that was left over here on the brush, but not too much that could significantly, especially with this volume of paint to go over an entire canvas, to really make that much of a difference. So when you're doing this without any medium, then we're really going to be racing against time to apply the paint evenly as possible and then to remove it as quickly as possible. So I'm just even going to set myself, not a timer, but I want to be able to just have an idea of how long this is taking me. So I'm gonna set like a 4-minute. Let's do the stopwatch. So I'm just gonna. Okay, let's using just water on here. Okay. So a few things I'm noticing right off is that it is definitely much darker. Right? It's there's not really anything in there that is there's not really much medium in there to thin the paint. I did use water, but I also had a lot of paint on there. Okay, so now now rather than using the cloth or my finger, I'm trying to find something that's a little bit sharper. I can feel the urgency of. So my stars are going to be a bit smaller. I'm also moving around the canvas as much as possible so that as things do dry, I don't just have one patch that looks really nice. I've got this technique spread around here. I can see it. There's parts of it that are almost dry right now. So now it's definitely a race against time. Like some of this in here. So that's 2.5 minutes expired so far. I'm actually surprised as I'm able to get as much done right now. The other thing that I see is it's not as even, right? I wasn't able to really brush it in, and like I've got these weird little streaks and stuff. So, which would have, if I was painting with the slow dry medium or glaze, I'd have a bit more of an even color application than I do right now. Okay, got a bunch of stars in there. Okay, see if I can just adjust in here. In fact, let's dip. Got a little bit of water on my finger here. Alright, so I have a few things in there I'm not super happy with. There either. So, as you can see, I can do it. Do I get the results I want? I can make it work, but I'm also happy that I had a little bit more of an opportunity to play with the other mediums before I did this, so that I could kind of get the technique down and I have a little more confidence about when I am trying to do this a little bit faster. So I like, actually, it makes me want to do this one over and not use my finger each time, because I like the smaller stars. I like being able to see, just like hers, the stars that are, you see how they kind of have like a bit of a halo? So I feel like this is much closer to hers, right? Because we've got, let's see if I just zoom in on hers. See how like we have these larger halos with just a smaller point inside, right up here. So I feel like right now, this is as like I've got her technique, which I mean, again, I don't know exactly, but I feel like this is pretty close. Now it's 5.5 minutes since I began applying that paint. A lot of it is dry. There's parts, you know, up here I'm not super happy with, but if I start fiddling with it, then all goes out the window. That's the other thing with the slow dry medium, is if I, let's say this is a mistake, I could just take my brush, brush it back in, and everything would be fine, because it would all, it's all manipulatable, I guess. Okay. So, anything else I want to do? What I'm going to do, this last little step I'm going to do is add a little bit of white to the pictures, both of them. So, just little tiny highlights. I'm going to use my smallest brush. And I am gonna, let's say, I'm gonna take a little tiny bit of the warm blue on there. So it's not gonna be totally purely white. Get a little bit of, just a little bit of blue on there. And then I'm going to go around and add this to not every star, because again, not every star is super, super bright, right? But this is also an effective strategy so that, you know, later on, if you have this painting up in your house and you turn all the lights off, wherever there's white, especially as the lights dim, we talked about this a little bit with the Thomas Kinkade. Wherever there's white, it's going to appear to kind of glow a little bit. So it might not be super obvious right now, but as the lights come down, the areas with white will be the brightest, as we would sort of hope they would be on a night scene. So I'm just taking my time and trying to do a careful job here. When we're doing these little stars, it can be... You can accidentally kind of make weird shapes if you press too hard with your brush. Oh, my big head in the way. To turn it, but it's always so satisfying to speed it up and see. Yeah, let's turn it. Okay, so we're about, I'd say, 10 minutes from completely wrapping up. If you found this or any of the other episodes helpful, enjoyable, entertaining, useful, I would very much appreciate it if you would share this video with your friends, if you're part of artist groups. Letting them know about these classes would be a great gift to me. If you want to support the class with a small contribution or a large contribution, there's a link to the PayPal below. If you want to send a check or money order or an e-transfer, send me a message through the Facebook group and I'll send you my additional contact details. And I'm so blessed to have received so many generous contributions from you guys that, again, I just put right back into the show. It's not like I'm using it to go on vacation to Hawaii or anything. Not really many places to go anyway, even if I wanted to. Okay, that's good. I'm happy with that. Those little specks of white are going to make a big difference later on. Now I could add some white down into the clouds. She does have a few areas of brighter white. I'm a little bit reluctant to do that, but maybe I'll Okay, if I was to do that, ideally what I would do is let's use some of the retarder or slow dry medium. Oops, gotta open the cap, obviously. So the reason I want to use this is if I don't like what I'm doing, I can brush it away. All right, so I'm going to get this on my brush. I've got, I get another brush handy to, so I've got one brush that I'm going to use to add any extra little effects, maybe even up in here. And then another brush that I can use to blend things in, okay? So let's say we've got a big white highlight here. All right, I can brush that on, and then using this other brush, all right, I can kind of, it's kind of up to you as to how visible you want to make it. Okay, I feel like that's pretty good. Now I'm going to come up into here. I can also just go over some of these areas that were, oh, that I wasn't happy with because I didn't use any of the medium in the blue, so I'll put that there. And then similarly, I come around and just softening up these edges a bit. And since I made a kind of a mistake by going a little bit wide there, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of integrate that so-called happy accident in there and make it look like it was always meant to be. Again, and wherever there's this white is going to really show up well when you turn the lights down. So I'm going to kind of, I won't put it well, I'll kind of, it'll make its way throughout this whole band of streaming light. But in some places will be a little bit more intensely white than others. Okay. I think that one might be done. I'm just going to add a little bit of white to the other one, and it should take me about 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll sign off here. So, actually, let's just do a quick little blow dry on here. Okay, I do look at this, and I look at this one we just did, and I really like the stars in this one. Part of me really wants to go back over top of this with some more blue. Yeah, actually, I see my mom's written in the chat there to Irene about her daughter living in Australia. And yes, my own sister lives in Sydney. Or no, did I say my daughter or did I say my sister? I can't. I'm getting a little bit hungry. Our daughter lives upstairs. My sister lives in Australia with her husband and their gorgeous daughter, who just started grade 2. I think it's grade 2, right? So in a new school. Actually, they're in Wagga Wagga, Australia right now, because my sister is doing a residency at a hospital out there. And it sounds like it's going really well. Okay, so I'm putting these little stars on here. I do think this little bit of white really helps. Even just now, adding the white over top of it makes me feel like maybe I don't need to do that extra layer of blue, that it kind of is working quite well. It really makes it look like these stars are glowing. And when the lights come down on both of these paintings, I expect them to be really fun as the stars kind of come out. So our class that begins, I guess it's technically not, I wouldn't say it even really a class, it's just kind of a paint-along sessions. I mean, I will be explaining step by step what I do. But, you know, if people really want, I can always say, well, go back and watch such and such an episode where we use this technique. I've really kind of fully explained such and such. So we're mostly, it's kind of a little bit more on the maybe intermediate level. I think now that you guys have a pretty good, you know, sense of a bunch of different techniques, now we can really kind of go have fun playing with all of them and using them at different times for all sorts of different reasons and purposes. And you know, when I look at these two paintings, we'll look at them side by side. I'm not sure I have a favorite anymore. And it's gone back and forth as to... You can see why having a few different paintings on the go is really helpful, because it really takes some of the pressure off. Because if you're just making one painting, if it doesn't turn out, then you feel kind of frustrated. At least if you get one of the two turns out, you feel a little bit better. But it also provides me with the opportunity to experiment and play, whereas, so if I just have one painting, I might be a little bit more reluctant to do something like I did, where I just tried using just the paint with water on there. I probably would not have done that today had I only had one painting on the go, because I'd be much more afraid of what might happen if I ruined that painting, especially towards the very end of it, right? You know, it's people feel a lot more freedom playing and experimenting in the first like 20 minutes of a painting than they generally feel right towards the end, where they're like, oh, I don't know, after I just spent 2 hours on this, am I really gonna roll the dice right at the end? Ooh, that made a huge difference. I'm also finding I'm going back over some of the white a second time, because as it dries, it gets a little bit more transparent. I put a little bit more color back over top of it. and it pops again. That's super interesting. It makes a big difference just putting that white on there. All of those little areas that I didn't like with the fingerprints, that I've just, especially compared to the other one, it's like, and now it seems to have worked itself out. So you never know until you do it, right? We'll just take one more look at hers as we wrap this up. Just put a little bit of light on the clouds again. Okay, and we're just going to brush this in. If you're part of the Facebook group, I'll be posting info on there about our next few sessions, so you'll see those appearing over the weekend. I'm also going to do another session this Saturday where I look at all the great work that you guys have sent in, because there's so much of it that I'm going to do that all the way until we get to the end. So there's probably going to be a couple more of those sessions. And because sometimes people go back and revisit some of the paintings, or they're a little bit behind us, it kind of makes sense for things to... So we might, it might be towards the end of February where we do the last feedback session on this particular class, just because if I just did it all this weekend, there's a few of you who probably won't even have a chance to start this one. So okay, I'm thinking okay, so let's take a look at these two side by side here. We'll move this one here, and this one here. It's a little darker, less light shining out in here, so but it is more blue. Now this one was the one that we did with the cold blue, or the cool blue, as a background. This is the one where we used the cool yellow and cool blue to get that bit more of a glow in the dark green effect, right? So and there's been this. Let me see. This is the one where we just put the ultramarine blue with just water as our final coat. So as expected, it turned a little bit darker. It also reacted to the yellow that was in the blue, right? So we had, so what's happening is we have colors crossing the neutral core here, which is making this blue darker, right? It's taking the warm blue and adding almost a little bit of brown into it, right? So just as let's just our final time looking at this. So we've used this color. So in this one here, what we had is just the cool blue and white as a background. And then we built up layers of warm blue over top of it. So basically just like two different blues, right? We had a cool blue with white underneath, and then we put the warm blue over top. So we still have a pretty luminous ultramarine blue look, versus this one, we had kind of like this color in the background, right? That was our, so, and then we put this color over top of it. So you could see this color going over top of here. We're getting closer to the neutral core as opposed to kind of staying in this area. So that's why this is much darker and less saturated, right? Less poppy blue. So just that little bit of a change has made quite a bit of a difference towards the end. And you wouldn't think that, because this one, you know, that first layer is under 3 layers of paint. So you would think like, well, by the second or third layer, it's going to be gone, right? Whereas it's pretty clear how those original washes ultimately affect the final color that we see on the painting, because that light has got to bounces all the way down through those layers of paint back to our eyes, and it's picking up the different colors as it moves back towards us. So pretty interesting, I think, just to kind of as to close there, these 2 blues and how they've been modified by the very first colors we put on the canvas to begin with. Right? Okay, so let's get the pen out. Let's autograph these, and then we'll sign off for our very final time for this course here. It's still very wet. Okay. So this is my name. Sometimes I have to be reminded. As I've said many times before, I said my own name wrong at my own wedding. So, it wouldn't be surprising if I wrote somebody else's name there by accident. What's today's date? Is February 4th, 2021. Flash. Sign this one too. Ah, thank you for the donations in the chat there. That's really cool. Thank you, everybody. We'll do, if I remember what I just did. This one was, you know, I'm gonna finish I feel like I'm getting my fingers on the front of this painting, so I'll finish that at another time. Again, just one last look at these, and I thought like this painting in particular would be kind of a fitting end for this course, kind of the Arctic nights, the sun going down. So, whew, let me see. So, everybody, thank you so much for coming along with me on this journey. We began all the way back on September 15th, what, 4.5 months ago, and here we are, the beginning of September. We've gone all the way through the dark days of winter, and we're coming out on the other side here into summer. And knock on wood, 2021 is going to treat us much better than 2020. So I'm really honored that so many of you, many of whom I've never met and may never actually meet in person, have joined up with me to learn about a bunch of different artists and their techniques. And I'm really blown away by all the artwork that I've seen you guys create, that you've sent me, and that I've been able to share with people. It's a true honor. I'm really, really blown away. It's like, I can't believe that so many people have decided to pick up painting in their spare time. And now after you've made 40, 45 paintings, you know, you really now know how to paint better than I think a lot of professional artists do, because we've explored so many different techniques. You know, even myself, I've grown as an artist just teaching these classes because I've had to investigate a whole bunch of techniques which I haven't been that familiar with. And I've learned to appreciate some mediums, especially the slow dry medium, which, to be honest, I used very infrequently before this class, but had to use out of necessity for like paintings like today. And these are not the kind of paintings I normally make in my own art practice. But now that I have these techniques down, now I know what I can do with them. It opens up, in my mind, all the possibilities. I was talking to my wife the other day, I'm thinking, wow, you know, now I can do all these other things. Like the possibilities for my own paintings have opened much wider, because previously I was only making the paintings that I knew I was capable of making based on my technical skill level, right? Now that technical skill level is much wider, and like, wow, well, I can do a lot more than I ever knew I was capable of. And my hope is that many of you feel the same way about your own abilities, right? And now we're going to put all of that to use in the next few classes, or the next 4 months potentially, if you want to join me for that journey. We're going to be making paintings based on other artists, just like we've been doing so far, but I think we'll be able to kind of go to that next level where we're not kind of introducing techniques, but we're applying those techniques, right? So now, I'll invite you guys to paint along with me, but also to take your own little detours as you go, as you think like, you know what, Michael's using, I don't know, the Renoir technique for this painting, but you know what, I'm going to try using the Kate Graham technique on this painting, you know? And then we'll be able to look at all those results on the Facebook page afterwards and see where you guys ended up, which is super exciting, because I know for a fact you guys are going to be experimenting and coming up with different results than I did that will hopefully work better than mine, so that I can learn as well. And on our Thursday class, we're going to be painting original paintings, brand new paintings, not studying art by other people, but we're going to be looking at things in the news, and we're going to be making original paintings based on photographs and videos that I find. And I'm going to rely on you guys to help me figure out what those artworks are going to be. So on our Tuesday class, I'll kind of ask at several points, hey, what do you think we should paint on Thursday? And I'll need you guys to chime in the chat, as well as on the Facebook group. So I'd be really interested to hear what those are, because that is going to be a lot of fun. Making brand new paintings, and again, using all the library of techniques we now have, we're going to be able to create some really cool artworks. So everybody, that brings me to the very, very end. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I can't wait to go on the next one with you. We're going to start a whole new chapter next week. Thank you very much. I'm super honored to have so many wonderful people join me here. So we'll see you on the flip side, everybody. And we'll see you on Saturday, when we'll talk about some of the paintings that you guys have also made. Enjoy the rest of your evening, morning, lunch, wherever you are on planet Earth, and we'll see you in a few days. Goodbye, everybody.